So today we're going to study Proverbs 31. So we're going to start and get some context out of the first few verses, but you guys said specifically that you want to study the virtuous woman part, which starts in verse 10, and we all know that I can talk for hours, so that is probably a good idea. So today at the start of the video, you probably watched me talk about how I'm waking up at 5:30. I woke up at 5:30 today. And so there are probably a lot of birds chirping that you can hear, but I'm trying to do this thing where I do it for a week, and this is the first day of it. I'm not going to do a video every single day, but I am going to try to make a video over my whole week. So you might see clips of this in the next video too. But let's get started. Okay, so the first verse of this gives us most of the context that we need, and it says the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. So right off you have a really cool woman character of the Bible that isn't named, but this isn't something that he learned on his own. It's something that his mother taught him. So that's like number one, just starting off with the idea that women can be wise, and you can find wisdom in women, which was not always an idea that people subscribed to, because it used to be that women were more less educated, and they weren't allowed to seek an education, and they were more property than actual people. So you have this reminder that you can find some wise words from women right off the bat. Okay, and then so she starts talking about something else that isn't what we're trying to study today. And so we go down to 10, because we know that it was the words of King Lemuel, but it was given to him by his mother, and it was something his mother taught him. So we know who the author is and who the, I guess, original author is. And so you go down to verse 10, and it says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. Her heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil." So, for instance, so her price is far above rubies. And then this shows us that it's talking about a virtuous woman. So, and then her heart, the heart of her husband, safely trusting. That is important. Okay, so her husband trusts in her because he knows that she's going to do what she needs to do as a wife and a mother and all the roles that she has. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ship. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planted a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengthened her arms. She perceived her merchandise is good, her candle goeth out not by night. So overall, just from all of that, you can tell that she is super hardworking. Like, she does all of this stuff right here. So she seeks out materials that she can use to make a living, and she gets up early, which I didn't even think about this at all. I promise I did not plan this, but this is the first day of me trying to get up at 5:30 every morning, and it's saying that she rises up while it is still night, and she gives meat to her household, which is kind of funny because it's really relevant to this whole challenge of mine to myself. So she considered buying a field, and the fruit of her hands she planted a vineyard. And so she girded her loins with strength, and strengthened her arms. And she perceived her merchandise is good, her candles goeth out not night. Basically, all of this shows that she is super hardworking. Okay, she layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the staff. She stretcheth out her hands to the poor, yea, she stretcheth out her hands to the needy. So she is hardworking. She is also generous. I should probably write these down. Okay, so all of these. Hardworking. And she's also skilled. It shows that she's skilled. Oh, you can't see what I'm writing down there. I'll show you. I wrote hardworking and skilled down there. So, the next part, like I said, she is generous. So this part isn't necessarily part of the soap method, but I decided to put it in there anyways. It says she is not afraid of the snow for her household are clothed with scarlet, which that probably has some form of meaning right here. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. I know that purple often in the Old Testament and in the New Testament is a symbol of royalty. So we have that. Her husband is known in the gates, where he sitteth among the elders of the land. Okay, so this verse right here really reminds me of Ruth. I think there's a verse in Ruth where it talks about Boaz going to the city gates. There was a verse in Ruth, or a phrase in Ruth, that really reminded me of that. Ruth is referred to as a virtuous woman. So yeah, because it says, my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. So if you want an example for another virtuous woman, you could look at Ruth. So I'll jot this down. Ruth. I can't write. So that was Ruth 3:11, where he calls her a virtuous woman, which is interesting because I literally have never thought about that, and I just noticed it. It talks about where, oh yeah, here it is. Okay, so in Ruth 4, the first verse of chapter 4, it says, then Boaz went up to the gate, and then I wrote at the top, this is from research, it's probably from BibleStudyTools.com, maybe, I don't remember. The town gate was a center of activity in ancient cities. Villagers often gathered here to talk about the things that are going on in the city. It was also where legal proceedings took place. So, this is the part where this is very much deviating. Oh no, that could be observations. Actually, yes. So that'll be an observation we write down. So, town gate.
Citizens gathered to discuss what is going on in the city and where
Legal gatherings. Oh, legal procedures. I'm sorry.
procedures took place.
Okay. See, that just randomly popped into my head. I was just randomly reminded of it. And so sometimes that might happen, and whenever it does, just look up whatever it is that you're thinking of. And most of the time, there is a connection somewhere. Okay, so her husband is known in the gates, which is talking about the city gates, where he sitteth among the elders of the land, which is why Boaz had to go to the city gate, because that's where all the elders sat, and then the kinsmen were there too. Yeah, because it says, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit ye here, and he sat them down. Okay. So we have that done. I should probably go reference Ruth 4:1, because that's where I got that from. Okay. So it says, she maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchants, which goes back to she is hard working, like really hard working. This girl is great. She's a very good example. I guess this is why she's called the virtuous woman. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She opened her mouth with wisdom, in her tongue is the law of kindness, which is a very important. I don't know why. I never really normally journal with this style, but whatever, we'll go with it. She looketh well at the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. See, this is something that I struggle with, because I constantly feel like I am doing nothing and I'm not being productive, even if I study and read for hours that day. Sometimes if I just like watch too many YouTube videos or too many episodes of a season on Netflix, I feel like I am eating the bread of idleness. So she does not eat the bread of idleness, and her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praiseth her. Which is funny that this says that, because not in all cases, obviously. There are probably some cases back then, whenever women weren't looked at as they are today, that there was a man who really, really honored his wife, and he thought that she was great, and he viewed her as a virtuous woman. But it wasn't super common. Like, it wasn't something that happened to every single couple. So it's interesting that he said that her husband also praiseth her for being this virtuous woman and for how she handles herself. And it wasn't because of how she looked. Like, if you go through this, it never ever does it explain how she looks. It talks about her character and what she does and how she conducts herself. Like, you don't see anything about, oh, she had red eyes. Oh, she had red hair and blue eyes, and she was beautiful, and anything like that. It tells things about her, like she's really hardworking, and she's super skilled, and she is generous, and she will give, and she stretches her hand out to the poor. And once again, it'll say that she's hardworking, and that she is wise, and that she seeks out wisdom, just like Proverbs says. Throughout all Proverbs, it's talking about wisdom, and it's talking about how we should search for wisdom, and that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. And so over and over again, we get these reminders that we really should seek out wisdom, and when we seek out wisdom, we're going to find it, because it's not hidden somewhere for only the elect people. It's for anyone. And so I just thought that was really interesting. Have done virtuously, but thou exceedest them all. So, like I said, this is basically a formula for being a virtuous woman. Like, you could look at this and then apply it to your life not very easily, but you could very much apply this to your life. Favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Once again, that's the gates that we were talking about. And actually, it mentioned it twice, which I normally like when something mentions something to like link them up like that. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. Like, it even says that beauty is vain. And so one day, if all you're known for is being pretty, you're gonna get wrinkles, and you're gonna get little imperfections that everyone in society deems as not attractive. And so one day, you're not going to have that beauty, because you're going to be older, and that youthful beauty that you had is not going to be there anymore. And so since she fears the Lord, she acts this way. This is what causes her to be a virtuous woman, because she understands what God wants out of her, and she respects him enough that she obeys what he says. And so this is really what sums up being a Proverbs 31 woman, a virtuous woman, is that she listens to God and models her life after Jesus. Let her be praised in the gates. Okay, so now that we've read through it, typically what people do in the scripture whenever they are doing the soap method is write down what it is that they read. But I kind of want to put a twist to it. So I want to write down basically a summary of what I read. So a virtuous woman is hardworking. So she is hardworking, but you'll notice that she doesn't push herself too far. So it seems like she can handle everything that she gets herself into. So the thing of saying that a virtuous woman is hardworking isn't that she works herself to death and she is constantly doing things and she's overwhelming herself. It's that she seeketh out wool, and so she riseth while it is night. And so it never really hints at her being overworked or anything, because it says that she's wise, and obviously if she's wise, surely if she's wise, she doesn't take on too much, and so there's not too much on her plate. And it never really hints at that. It even says that, you know, she's not afraid of the snow and everything. So it seems like she is not taking on too much. So when we say hardworking, we don't mean that she's constantly working and she never takes any breaks. It just means that she is a hard worker and she gets everything that she's trying to set out to do done, and she's very skilled about it. So she's hardworking, she's very generous, and she's known for being, I'm just going to end this as wise. That basically sums up everything. She's known for being wise. Now, I would say that to be a virtuous woman, you basically just need to model yourself after Jesus, because like I could describe all those characteristics of him. He was really, really kind to the needy, and he would heal the needy. And so that is a characteristic I would give to him. He was definitely very wise. So I think that a virtuous woman basically just models themselves after Jesus and his example. So scripture we have done. I'm going to highlight this in pink. I'm going to highlight this in pink. I'm going to highlight this in pink. Something that I don't see very many people do in the SOAP method when it's scripture is write down like the context of it. So I am going to do it, but I don't know if that's something that everyone does. So we know that it's written, I'll put a little line right here to separate these. So we know that it's written by King Lemuel, or Lamuel, whichever one you want to say. Observations, we found that, see, sometimes I have a hard time separating observations from applications because sometimes they can be similar. So we observed that she is hardworking. She riseth while it is still yet night, and giveth meat to her house. She's also skilled. We know that her husband is able to trust her because she is a virtuous woman, and so he knows that she'll be able to take care of the household, and do all the other, not just that she's only good for taking care of the household, but like she can do all of the roles that she has. She stretches out her hand to the poor and reaches for her hands to the needy. So we know that she's generous. And so since she is generous, then we should be generous. So we observed that, you know, her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land, and then we actually tied that to Ruth 4:1 because we remembered that Ruth 4:1 talked about that too. And she maketh fine linen and selleth it, and she delivered girdles to the merchants. So that is also hardworking. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is the law of kindness. Oh, we didn't even see that part. Well, we did see it, but we didn't talk about it. She is wise and kind, because sometimes we can forget the kind part and only focus on the wise part, and the kind part is just as important. So she is wise, plus she's kind, and so she doesn't use her wisdom to belittle anyone, and she doesn't use her wisdom to take advantage of anyone, which I guess we should probably write that down. Okay, so we have that done. She is wise and kind, and since she's wise and kind, she doesn't use her wisdom to belittle or take advantage of anyone. So she eateth not the bread of idleness, which I said earlier is very fitting. But last night I started realizing that I wake up generally at 11 through 12, and so I spend like a good majority of my day asleep, because I could totally wake up at 8 and then from 8 to 11, you know, like read and pray and do all these things that I should do, but I sleep instead. And so then I only get maybe like an hour in sometimes, and a couple of hours in sometimes, of reading and praying. if I spend 8 through 11 just sleeping, that's a couple of hours, and I could easily fit in an extra hour of reading and studying. So today I really resonate with the she doesn't eat the bread of idleness, because I've currently been feeling like I've been very idle. Like, I have the ability to wake up earlier, but I'm not doing it because I'm lazy. And I get so tired for barely anything. So she will do him good and not evil all her do you hear that? Oh my goodness. Okay. Something we didn't notice earlier is that it says that she girdeth her loins with strength and strengthen her, and then it says strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. And you can apply these verses to other verses of the Bible. I know that there is a verse that talks about putting on God's righteousness, and there's another verse. There are multiple verses. Hold on, I'll look this up. When we go to Colossians 3:12, it tells us to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And that sounds a lot like this Proverbs 31 woman, because she stretches out her hand to the poor, and she reaches out her hand for the needy. That's obviously compassion and kindness. Humility. You never once read where she is boasting about her talents and how hardworking she is and how she's doing all this stuff for her house. Are you doing anything for your house? And you never really read anything about that here. And gentleness and patience. Obviously, to be able to do all of that, you have to have patience, because sometimes when you try to stretch your hands out to the poor and needy, they'll refuse it, because sometimes there's this stigma of receiving help. And so you have to have patience to do these types of things, and to look after your household and be able to provide for them and be hardworking and do all this stuff. And so when you look at Colossians 3:12, she really fits that model, where it says, put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, which is gentleness, and patience. So these are things that we are told to put on, and she just wears them very well. So that is something that you could think about and look into further, because it says that strength and honor are her clothing. And my brain, just when it says that strength and honor are her clothing, there are multiple verses where it talks about how we should clothe ourselves in this, or clothe ourselves in that, or put on God's righteousness and stuff like that. So let me write this down. So Colossians 3:12, we got to put on compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, which is patience. Or not patience, sorry, that's gentleness, and patience. And so I would say the virtuous woman wears these well. So the virtuous woman wears the compassion and kindness and humility and meekness all very, very well. I don't know why I'm highlighting this in pink, because I'm supposed to be highlighting this in orange because it's an observation, but actually it could be an application. Yeah. Because we're not really observing that, we're applying it. Yeah. Okay. See, here's the thing. I honestly sometimes don't really tell the difference between applications and observations, if we're just going to be, completely honest here. I know that applications means you're applying it to something, I get that, but sometimes I think observations can be applied to something, so it would go under both categories. So I guess sometimes you just have to really choose which one you want it to be. So we went through all of that. Our observations are, once again, the virtuous woman is hardworking, generous, and wise. If we just boiled it down to 3 characteristics, that would be what it is. And so I would say, to be a virtuous woman, just model yourself after Jesus. That sounds so weird because he wasn't a woman, but you know what I mean. He is the idea of a perfect human. He was without sin, and so if you, man or woman, if you want to model yourself after anyone, should definitely be Jesus. And then she was wise and kind, which we said earlier, she didn't use her wisdom to belittle or take advantage of people. We are at the end of the space we have for O. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. That's a good one.
Doesn't eat the bread of idleness. Do you hear that? Oh, idleness.
You hear that car, truck, whatever it is? So the next part, observations. Woohoo! We're almost done, which is, I don't know why I'm saying woohoo, because shouldn't a video ending not be sad or something? And the applications, we applied Virtuous Woman. We didn't apply it. We just realized that Virtuous Woman is actually a phrase used in Ruth 3:11. So you also model yourself after Ruth if you want to be a virtuous woman. And to make this even go further, like, okay, if you want to study comparing the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31 and the virtuous woman in Ruth, I could totally do that, because I'm just now realizing that, like, Ruth is really, really hardworking. Like, she went out in the fields and she provided for her and Naomi, which means she's also generous. And she was very hardworking because she would go out in the fields and she provided for her and Naomi. So she was wise and generous. And if you read it, it really does sound like Ruth. So you could probably do a study of the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31 to Ruth, which I can do if you really, really want me to. I also never did a video on Ruth, because I promised like forever ago that I would do one, and then I just finished the book and I had so many other things that I just never got around to doing it. So I kind of owe you that. So just let me know if you want it. So applications, Colossians, we have oops, I spelled that. I put the O in front of the L. Colossians 3:12. The things mentioned to put on is something she wears well. Okay, so getting into actual applications, would you apply this to your life? We can know that we should be working. The three characteristics that we've been talking about this entire time that we said sums up her, if you're wanting to only boil it down to three characteristics. We should be hardworking, generous, and wise. And I'm just making this study go on longer and longer, but like I said earlier, Proverbs is basically just laying out what wisdom is. It talks about wisdom over and over and over, and it tells you every single time that with the beginning of wisdom is found in the fear of the Lord. I already have some study of Proverbs. Let me get to it. Okay, so Proverbs here. So I wrote down the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and Proverbs 8:13 defines what the fear of the Lord is, and then Proverbs 2 explains that it comes from God. So where does it say that she fears the Lord? Fears the Lord. So we need to look at Proverbs 1 and 7, because that says at the beginning of that says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And so then we go to Proverbs 8:13, and that defines what the fear of the Lord is. And then we go to Proverbs 2 and 6, and that tells us that it only comes from the Lord. And now if we go to Proverbs 2 and 6, it says 5 and 6, it says, "Then thou shalt understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God. For God giveth wisdom. Out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding." So you find wisdom in here, but we know that wisdom, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, which it even says the beginning, to understand the fear of the Lord and to find the knowledge of God. So this woman has already found all of the stuff. She understands that she should respect God, and she should listen to him, and she should obey him. So these are things that we can apply to ourselves. It says that she opens her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is the law of kindness. And so we should watch what we say, and we should make sure that our tongue is the law of kindness as well. And so basically, any characteristic that you find in here, you can apply it to yourself. And the last application is to not eat the bread of idleness. So that is our last application. Now, this next part is personal. This next part is prayer. And so there are different styles of prayer, obviously. There are different prayers in the Bible. If you're struggling with prayer, the biggest thing to do is to find the different prayers in the Bible and to start modeling some prayers after that and making them your own, so that you learn, this is how they prayed and this is how I can pray. Like the Lord's Prayer is a great one. It's a great guide for praying. Like I said, prayer is super, super personal, and I may write down stuff that you necessarily don't feel the need to write down. So, like I said earlier, I was super, super convicted over the idleness, the bread of idleness thing. And so in my brain, and what God's speaking to me is that I need to stop sleeping so much because I sleep too much. But you might not have that. It might be perfectly okay for you to sleep until like 11 or 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, however late you want to sleep. And so while it may be something that I feel like I shouldn't do anymore, it won't necessarily mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's something that you shouldn't do anymore. So, like I said, prayer is super, super personal. Basically, if I were to pray out this passage, what I would do is I would ask that God help me develop all of the characteristics of the Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. I'm just going to do bullet points because if I actually started writing out a prayer, it'd probably take way too long for me to do this, and I'm 90% sure this is already a 30-minute video, and I'm gonna have to ask you guys if you want me to break it up or not. I would ask God for help in applying these characteristics to myself. Or no, developing these characteristics.
And developing these characteristics in myself.
The next thing I would say is praise Him for what you do have. So the characteristics that you do have, and the wisdom that you do have, and the knowledge that you do have. And not in a very prideful way. Like, you're not trying to be the Pharisee in one of the parables that Jesus said, where he talks about how he's saying, oh, I thank you for I am not like this other guy. And he basically says that that's not the way that you should pray. But this isn't something that you're doing out of pride. This is just saying thank you for revealing it, because it's not you. It's nothing you. It's what the characteristics that He gave you, and that the wisdom that He gave you. So you're thanking Him for what He has given you, not necessarily something that is all on you, because it's not you, it's Him. He gave you those characteristics, and because of Him you have that knowledge. So it really is nothing to be prideful of in the first place. Like I said, we're not doing it in a very prideful way. We're doing it as humbly as we can, but praise Him for the characteristics that you do have and the wisdom that you do have that not everyone has. And lastly, ask Him for opportunities to express these characteristics. What I mean is, say you aren't very generous, and you asked Him, whenever we asked Him for help in developing these characteristics, you asked Him to be more generous. So you can pray that He gives you more opportunities to express this, and not just that He gives you more opportunities, but that you see and you can acknowledge that there are opportunities. So your eyes are open to the opportunities that you have to express this. So like maybe there's a little kid and she's trying her best to buy herself actually I saw this in the store the other day, which is why I thought about it. But maybe there's a little kid and she's at the counter and she's trying so hard to find all of the loose change that she has, because she wants to buy her own soda and her own candy bar, right? So she's wanting to do this for herself. And she's a little short on her change. And so a generous person, you could just pay for it. Just be like, here you go. And you pay for it. And so ask Him for opportunities. But like I said, not just to give you opportunities, but to open your eyes to the opportunities that you may already have that you're not realizing yet. to express these characteristics, because if you're asking him to develop them, you have to act out on them. You can't just say, hey God, please help me develop kindness, and please help me develop wisdom, and please help me develop being generous and hardworking, but then never act on them or never try to practice them. So you need to ask him for help in developing them, but you also need to ask him for help in expressing them. So that is how these are just the little bullet points that I would hit if I were praying this out, and I were trying to pray Proverbs 31. I really, really hope this was helpful. I know I always say this, but I didn't start out YouTube with the goal of, I'm gonna start making videos and then I'm gonna get monetized and then I'm gonna make lots of money and I'm not really gonna care about what I post. I did it because a lot of people were asking me to, and they really wanted videos because they were more audio or visual learners, and just having a post every single day or every other day wasn't super helpful to them, because they learn more visually by showing it. And so I honestly I say it a lot, but I really do hope this was helpful somehow. And if you do this study with me, or you follow along, I would love to see it. So if you want to send me a DM, if you're here and you're from YouTube and you don't know anything about me, I do have an Instagram called Radiating Christ, which I don't know how. I don't see anybody learning about me from YouTube, because I don't think that's ever happened before. Maybe it has though. Maybe there's a person in the comments saying, actually, I did learn about you from YouTube, so you're wrong. Anyways, so if you do use this and you think it's, not really if you think it's super helpful, I want to know if you think it's not helpful too. But if you did use this, I would love to see what you did. I would love to see what you came up with. Sometimes you guys see things that I don't even see. I didn't even notice it, and then you're like, hey, look here, this was really cool. And I'm like, man, you guys are really cool. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Her life after days, and something that would be blessed. Oh my goodness. Okay, there was a spider. I almost died.